They can control Jay-Z and Beyonce,
But not you, man.
but they can't control me. You
No,
see, it
you-
ain't no name I won't name. It's
Nobody told you it was going to be like this. Nobody warned you that 2026 was the year the whole house of cards came crashing down. But one man did. One man sat across from Shannon Sharpe years ago and looked directly into that camera like he was already reading the future.
He was the guy who told me about Epstein's Island more than a decade ago, and I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I was like, what are you saying? There's an island. Like, it sounds like a plot in a movie.
It sounded insane. It sounded like science fiction until the Department of Justice dropped over 3 million pages of files, and suddenly it wasn't science fiction anymore. And now, two of the loudest, most fearless voices in the country are pointing their fingers at the same direction, straight at Hollywood. Because here's what nobody is connecting right now. The names that are about to surface next, you're not ready. Let's set the scene, because none of this happened overnight, and nothing about this story is a coincidence. When Katt Williams sat down on Club Shay Shay back in January 2024, most people thought it was just drama. Another Hollywood beef, another comedian with something to prove. The entertainment media laughed it off. The blogs mocked him. His own industry tried to bury him. But while they were laughing, Katt was naming names. He called out Chris Tucker. He pointed at Jay-Z. He hinted at Beyonce. He talked about industry plants, manufactured careers, and a Hollywood ecosystem built on silence and sacrifice. People said he was bitter. They said he was washed. They said he needed to sit down and stay in his lane.
I think it is highly offensive for people who are smart enough to really know what's happening.
Now, less than 2 years later, every single thing that man said is either confirmed, being investigated, or is swimming in 3 million pages of federal documents. Because here's where Joe Rogan comes in. Joe wasn't in the gossip game. Joe was having conversations with scientists, conspiracy theorists, former government officials, and people who genuinely understood how power actually moves in this country. And years before any of us were paying attention, Joe's guest Alex Jones was warning him about an island.
I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I was like, what are you saying? There's an island. Like, it sounds like a plot in a movie. There's an island where they fly famous rich scientists and politicians, and they compromise them with underage girls and get it on film so they could use it against them. Like, what? That sounds like lizard people.
But it wasn't lizard people, was it? It was real. It was documented. It was organized. And it ran for decades in plain sight while the media looked the other way and celebrities smiled on red carpets and sat on talk show couches pretending everything was fine. Now those same celebrities are watching their follower counts collapse and their names appear in federal documents. And the two men who tried to warn everyone, Katt Williams from the inside and Joe Rogan from the outside, are essentially pointing at the same wall. And behind that wall, there are names you recognize. Names that are going to break the internet before this is over. Let's talk about what actually happened when the Epstein files were released, because the mainstream media has been doing everything it can to keep this sanitized and contained. In late January 2026, the Department of Justice released over 3 million pages of records, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images, all tied to investigations involving Jeffrey Epstein. And what made this release different from everything that came before was the sheer scale of it. This wasn't a leak. This wasn't a rumor. This was the federal government, under mandate from the Epstein Files Transparency Act, being forced to open the vault.
Tangled. You know, the whole thing is just, I think everybody who looks at it realizes this is a rabbit hole that just goes to the center of the earth. And there's so many people involved in it.
And that rabbit hole, it goes exactly where Katt Williams and Joe Rogan said it would. The files confirmed that Epstein was not some lone predator operating in the shadows. He was, in Joe Rogan's words, an asset, a fixer.
Jeffrey Epstein is part of a class of what are effectively professional fixers. And this is a kind of class of professional who sits not really within a particular government or private sector institution, but in the kind of sticky layer between them that connects them all.
A construct. Think about what that means. This was a man with an enormous amount of money that nobody could explain, who had access to royalty, billionaires and heads of state, who was vouched for by the most powerful people on earth, and whose entire operation, according to Joe Rogan, was almost certainly a blackmail compromise machine with everything on film.
But I think it was probably a part of a blackmail compromise effort.
yeah.
Because those guys, there's a fucking dirty secret about these people that are in Congress, and they party, okay? They're regular guys.
Yeah.
and regular women, and they're in their 30s or 40s or whatever they are, and every now and then they do coke, and they get drunk, and
Human beings.
And that is exactly how the machine worked. You lure in the powerful with the promise of privacy. You make them feel safe. You get them on film, and then you own them forever. Which is why so many of these names in the files aren't just people who went to a party once. They're people who kept going back over and over again. Now, before we get to the names that are coming next, let's quickly recap who is already in the fire, because the pattern here is important. Jay-Z. His name came up in an FBI hotline intake form from July 2019, an anonymous allegation describing an incident from around 1996 involving Harvey Weinstein. The moment that document went public, Beyoncé's Instagram reportedly lost somewhere between 200,000 and 10 million followers, depending on what analytics source you believe. Jay-Z and Beyoncé have both gone completely silent. No statement, no response, nothing. And as Katt Williams already told us,
Beyonce was on that island where they was kids.
Damn!
Yeah. Beyonce was on Pedo Island. Beyonce and the camel.
Yeah. They say she was in there like,
Right.
now look, the comedian was already saying this publicly, and now the broader public is asking the same question. Bill Gates. The emails in the files told a story that was so far from the dinner-only narrative he's been selling that even his own ex-wife couldn't stomach it.
I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so, the more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
But Melinda Gates had already made her feelings crystal clear.
Just unbelievable sadness. Unbelievable sadness, right? And again, I'm able to take my own sadness and look at those young girls and say, my God, how did that happen to those girls, right? It was many things, but I did not like that he'd had meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, no.
Mm-hmm. And you made that clear to him?
I made that clear to him. I also met Jeffrey Epstein exactly one time.
Did you?
Yes, because I wanted to see who this man was. And I regretted it from the second I stepped in the door. He was abhorrent. He was evil personified. I had nightmares about it after.
Naomi Campbell, 5 flights aboard the Lolita Express. Emails that appear to show her coordinating with Epstein. A lifestyle including her own private island that nobody can fully explain on a modeling salary. And when she was asked about Epstein directly on camera,
did you suspect what he was doing?
No. And what he's done is indefensible. And when I heard of what he'd done, it sickened me to my stomach, just like everybody else. Because I've had my...
And then there's Chris Tucker, caught on the Lolita Express. Claimed it was a humanitarian trip to Africa with Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey. Nobody was buying it then, and nobody is buying it now.
Yeah, I did. We flew Bill Clinton and a lot of different, that was a humanitarian trip to Africa. And I met him on that trip because it was his plane. I didn't know who plane we was getting on, but it was a whole...
Katt Williams called this years ago. He said the Chris Tucker we got now is not the same Chris Tucker we used to know. And everything since then has only made that statement land harder. Now here is where it gets really, really interesting. Because the DOJ's letter to Congress sent on February 15th, 2026 included a list of over 300 politically exposed persons whose names appear somewhere in the Epstein files. And some of those names sent the internet into complete meltdown. Beyoncé's name is on that list, as is Bruce Springsteen, Diana Ross, Bill Cosby, and that is just the official document. What sits in the files themselves, 3.5 million pages that the public is still actively sifting through, that is where the real threads are being pulled. Let's talk about Oprah Winfrey, because this is a name that keeps coming up whether the mainstream media wants to cover it or not. Oprah has not commented publicly on the Epstein files, not once. Her name does appear in those documents, though, to be clear, not as an accused participant in crimes. The appearance of her name in the files is largely tied to connections, media intersections, and social circles. But here is what people online are not letting go of. Oprah was close with Harvey Weinstein for years. She attended Diddy's parties, documented in photos that went viral. Her school in South Africa, the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls, became embroiled in its own deeply uncomfortable abuse scandal back in 2007. And one particularly striking detail from the files, Sarah Ferguson, Rogan, the Duchess of York, was emailing Epstein for advice about how to answer questions on Oprah's show. Epstein was coaching people on how to manage the public narrative around him through one of the most trusted media platforms on earth. Does that make Oprah guilty of anything? Absolutely not. What it does is raise the question of how much the most powerful media gatekeeper in America knew about who was sitting in her orbit, and why, even now, she has chosen complete silence over any kind of public statement about the most significant criminal network in modern American history. The internet is asking loudly. One viral post on X this week read, and this was shared millions of times, Oprah still hasn't said a single word about the Epstein files. Mind you, she had a whole show about R. Kelly. That is the tension that is driving this conversation right now. Now let's talk about Ellen DeGeneres. This is a name that has been absolutely exploding on X and across social media in the past 2 weeks. The actual official Epstein files do include Ellen's name, mostly in the context of media compilations and social references that were collected as part of the broader investigation. What does that mean? It means she appeared in materials that were gathered. It does not mean she committed crimes. But here is what is feeding the online wildfire. Ellen abruptly left her talk show under a cloud of workplace culture allegations. She then largely vanished from American public life and relocated overseas. That timing, combined with her name appearing in the files, has sent conspiracy communities into an absolute frenzy on X. And for a niche that runs on unanswered questions and conspicuous silences, Ellen's disappearance from the public eye while all of this is going down is gasoline on a fire.
Doesn't it seem like you could just throw all that into AI at this stage of the game?
Yes.
And just redact the names of the victims and let's go?
Yeah, of course.
It seems like that would take 5 minutes.
I mean, it feels like, you can't help but feel like the administration is just like watching their back, and that's why it's happening.
That is the exact energy driving these conversations online, because people are watching celebrities go quiet, watching the DOJ drag its feet, watching documents get released in painfully slow batches, and they are drawing their own conclusions. And when people draw their own conclusions in the age of X and TikTok, those conclusions go viral in hours. Here is the piece of this story that people are not spending enough time on, because it is one thing to say Epstein was a bad man. It is another thing entirely to understand how a convicted sex offender somehow maintained friendships with royalty, Silicon Valley billionaires, and Hollywood elites for over a decade after his conviction. Joe Rogan laid out the mechanics of this better than anyone.
You're the former president of the United States. You can't go to a nightclub.
Yeah, he said, I think there are people out there that provide experiences for certain people that have a hunger for them.
Yeah.
I was like, of course. And that's also how they compromise people too, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's how they get you to vote the way they want you to vote and play ball, Bobby.
This is the architecture of the entire operation. Epstein was not just a predator, he was infrastructure, a private, hidden black ops social club where the most powerful people in the world could indulge in whatever they wanted because there was nowhere else they could go without being exposed. And once they were in, they were documented permanently.
That video, you sucking a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
What do you want to do? Yeah. Because, like, I bet all those people have something on them. That's how they stay in the game.
They have to.
And now think about what Katt Williams has been saying for years, that you do not get to certain levels in Hollywood without crossing certain lines. That the people at the top are not there because of pure talent alone. That there is a transaction, sometimes willing, sometimes not, that happens on the way up. And that once you've crossed that line, your silence is bought.
People like Jay-Z and Pusha T, they made their living our people. So how the they gonna stand up for our people? You know what I'm saying? But we forget that because we love Jay-Z's music so much. We love Pusha's music so much, right? But you think they would ever, Beyonce had the best fit for somebody else?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You think they would ever tell the truth? No, if they told the truth, I think they'd go to jail. You know what I'm saying? So you have liars.
Man.
Liars are now the face of our culture.
Kanye said this in 2018. Joe Rogan has been saying the same thing from a completely different direction, and Katt Williams has been saying it from the inside. Three very different people from three very different worlds, landing on the exact same conclusion. The people at the top are compromised. They cannot tell the truth, and the files are proving it. Here is the part that should make every single person watching this genuinely uncomfortable. Because when you ask why the full picture still hasn't fully emerged, why so many names are redacted, why the DOJ missed its own release deadlines, why 3.5 million pages are still being processed, the answer is not incompetence.
I think they have video. I think if you've got an island and you want compromise on people, you can't just have hearsay.
I would say I would agree.
I watched him that girl. let's sue him. No, that's not how it works. You have to have video, and then you have to show it to the guy. Like Mr. Clinton, have a seat.
That is the real story. The video, the documentation, the material that was collected specifically to control people. And if that material exists and the weight of evidence strongly suggests it does, then the question is not who is on the list. The question is who is still being protected right now, today, while we are sitting here watching celebrities go quiet one by one. Representative Rogan said it plainly when the DOJ released their politically exposed persons list without any context. He called it purposefully muddying the waters. Because putting Janis Joplin, who died when Epstein was 17 years old, in the same letter as Larry Nassar, who went to prison for abusing hundreds of young women with no explanation of how either name appears in the files, is not transparency.
The photo dump and the emails, it's nuts.
But it's also they're doing it so slowly. Like, you guys have had this stuff for a year. Like,
we were promised multiple times, it's coming, it's coming.
Doesn't it seem like you could just throw all that into AI at this stage of the game?
Yes.
And just redact the names of the victims and let's go?
That is theater. The slowness is not accidental. The fragmentation is not accidental. And the silence from Hollywood's most powerful voices is absolutely not accidental. Here is what Katt Williams understood before almost everyone else. This is not about one man on a private island. This is about a system, a machine that was built to compromise the powerful, to control the influential, and to ensure that the people who were supposed to be the voices of culture, the celebrities, the moguls, the media titans, were too bought, too documented, too exposed to ever actually tell the truth. And the machine worked. For decades, it worked perfectly. Katt Williams tried to pull back the curtain and they called him crazy. Joe Rogan had Alex Jones in his ear for a decade, warning him about islands and blackmail operations, and he thought it sounded like lizard people. And everyone who tried to connect these dots publicly was laughed off, discredited, or quietly sidelined.
Truly Babylon, if this is the case. And so I would never speak out about it too much because I didn't want people to be like, what the f you talking about? Like, there's no way. It's Pizzagate. If somebody told you about the Epstein and you'd be like, man, come on now, this billionaire is really taking, and what, because I don't want to f it up, but
even the people who knew couldn't say it out loud without being destroyed, because that is how effective the machine was. But now the machine is broken. The files are out. The names are on federal documents. The follower counts are dropping. The executives are stepping down. A law firm chair resigned because his name appeared in scheduling emails. A former prince is stripped of his royal titles. And yet somehow the biggest names, the ones that would genuinely collapse the entertainment industry if they came fully into view, are still protected by redactions, by delays, and by a media apparatus that would rather do celebrity puff pieces than follow the threads in 3.5 million pages of federal evidence. The public on X is already drawing the connections. One post this week read, "The scariest part of the Epstein files isn't the names, it's how many people are still untouchable." That post got hundreds of thousands of shares because everyone watching this story unfold feels the same thing. The information is there, the patterns are visible, and the people who should be held accountable are still somehow walking free. Katt Williams said it directly. Joe Rogan said it in a different way. The machine compromised people so deeply, so completely, that even the cultural icons we trusted to reflect truth back at us were either participants or prisoners, and figuring out which one is which. That is the work that is still being done. So where does this leave us right now in February 2026? The Epstein files are officially, according to the DOJ, fully released. No more documents are coming. No new charges are being filed. The official position of the United States Department of Justice is that the matter is closed. But over 3 million pages of documents are still being read, still being cross-referenced, still being connected, and names that have not yet made the front pages are quietly sitting inside those files, waiting for someone to find the right email, the right flight log, the right photograph. Katt Williams is not done. He said all lies will be exposed. He did not put a deadline on that. Joe Rogan is not done. He has been having these conversations for years, and the files are only giving him more material to work with. And the public 50 million people who visited the Epstein file archives in the first week alone is not done. The question was never really who is in the files. The question is who has enough power to stay protected even after the files come out. And watching that answer slowly reveal itself, name by name, silence by silence, deleted Instagram comment by deleted Instagram comment, that is the story of 2026. Katt Williams tried to warn you. Joe Rogan tried to warn you. The only question left is who is next? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Who do you think is the next major name to fully surface from these files? And if this video connected any dots for you that the mainstream media is refusing to touch, you already know what to do.